Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Insurance Journal's Academy of Insurance's weekly webinar Aftershow. I'm your host, George, and joining for the Aftershow today is an esteemed panel. We've got the director of the Academy of Insurance, Mr. Patrick Wraight, and today's instructor. Today's class was E&S Property Underwriting. I didn't have the full title in the course description, but it was kind of a lions, tigers, bears, oh my type of situation. So our instructor for today is Mr. John Brunette. John, welcome to the Aftershow. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be with you guys.
John, this was your first class with the Academy and first after show, of course, resulting in such. I was reading your introduction, and you've got a really, really storied career in insurance with a wide variety of topic knowledge and everything. What drew you as far as your first class with the Insurance Journals Academy to teach something about E&S property underwriting? You could have taught maritime, or I think 6 or 7 other different things. So what drew you to this topic today?
Well, it's one that I think when you look at where the marketplace is going, there are more and more risks finding their way into that bucket. But then, secondly, the E&S market is growing exponentially, not incrementally, but exponentially. And then I think third, probably just as critical, uh, that's some of my most recent experience. So call it recency bias for lack of a better term, but uh, that's what I've found in the last 5 years that I've been very heavily involved with building portfolios and what the controls are in those portfolios, and then how insurance companies translate those controls to the right return on investment.
Got it. Definitely lots of really critical information here in today's class. I was curious about, you had a slide about property placement and how that affects E&S coverage or E&S writing the policies. You had a couple of bullets where poor financial a poor financial situation might warrant E&S, flood exposures. What if someone had a flood exposure, but they were good financially? Do the two things offset each other, or could you still write an E&S policy?
Well, you could write an E&S policy virtually any time, but I think what typically will happen more frequently is the better financial condition that a risk finds themselves in. They're in a position to mitigate that flood exposure to a point where they may not have to go into the E&S market. So just to give you an example, um, where I live in Tennessee, I live in a flood zone A area, and I chose from a mitigation strategy to build and elevate my house above base flood elevation. And that's not because I have a lot of money. It's just because that's what I know. That's the business that I'm in. And I knew that if I were ever going to be able to afford flood insurance, I needed to get myself in a position where the trade-off would be such that the money I spent elevating would I could amortize it over a period of time by the money I'd save on the flood insurance. So they don't necessarily go hand in hand. I would say the inverse of that, the risk with poor financial and in a non-flood hazard area, that becomes, I think, a marketplace issue. How many insurers are willing to take on a poor financial risk? In other words, with limited capital and limited capabilities, knowing they won't have a flood exposure, but they may have an even worse exposure because maintenance doesn't get done and the overall property's not kept up to spec the way it needs to be because they just don't have the capital.
Got it. Thank you, John. Patrick, what do you think of this topic in general, E&S property underwriting, and what did you think of John's class today in particular?
Yeah. So in general, the idea of working in the E&S market, that's a piece of curriculum I think that we are kind of lacking in. So I was glad when John reached out and said, hey, I've got this class and it's all about E&S property, and we do a lot of standard market property. So I felt like it was a really good fit for us. And specifically, there was so many great examples in today's class. And additionally, one of the things that I felt like was well dealt with was the idea of building a tower of insurance, where you're dealing with multiple insurers, where you're dealing with multiple layers of who wants to write what, how much, and the different terms. So I really felt like this met multiple needs of ours. And of course, John did a great job, and we had such a great class full of so many different pieces of this. One thing that I learned I had not seen before was this idea of pedestal or podium, I think, construction, where the lower floors are of a higher construction quality, and you've got upper floors of frame. John, are we seeing this in a lot of markets where you're seeing that kind of construction?
Yeah, we are. And again, it's prevalent in two areas geographically. One is the large metro style, suburban style areas where, again, you're going to go vertical. And so you want to go vertical with the greatest density possible. And the higher you're going to go vertical, the better that foundation has to be, the better that podium that it's built on has to be. But then the other one, for a very different reason, we see in coastal areas, and we see that because it's what I call flow through parking. So, for example, if you see almost like a building on stilts, okay, that you would see a frame building out on the coast, a resort home, that the ground level, grade level is the parking area, but it is completely flow through. There's nothing to inhibit storm surge, for lack of a better term, from flowing through that. And so that same thought process with podium ends up being those lower flow through areas end up being concrete or some stronger material that's not going to degrade, because if that degrades, the whole thing comes down.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get those two examples. The density that you need a lot of vertical in a tight, congested urban situation, like the picture we had at the facility there in Atlanta, or you see the coastal situation. Again, a lot of high-rise beach condos will have those first 2 or 3 stories that are nothing but parking. Translated, if a storm's coming, you have enough notice to get your car out of there, so that the water just goes through and you're on the 13th floor. Fingers crossed that we don't have a 13th floor high storm surge.
Yeah, and what was interesting to me was that gives, in a way, it may give the builder at least a bit of a break on construction costs. I mean, they've only got to hit the fire resistive or the concrete up so many levels, and then they've got that frame above that. Of course, the underwriter in me kind of started to twitch a little bit with the idea that you got 4 stories, perhaps. I thought one of those buildings looked like a 5-story frame building above the concrete level, and I started to get a rash a little bit just thinking about that.
Yeah, and again, the video of the fire in Houston kind of played to that, because that particular, and again, also the picture of the one in Atlanta, it plays to that, and those kinds of scenarios you see much lower much smaller number of stories, so only 4 or 5 stories in that situation, because again, frame is what it is, and it's only going to be so strong.
Mm-hmm.
So with a vertical reach. Now there are some what we call mass timber projects, which are gaining popularity again in dense areas where vertical construction, and some mass timber projects I've been reading are in the 18 to 20 stories. Let that explode on you for a minute. A 20-story high frame building that's got all kinds of challenges to it. Not the first of which is, how do I fight that fire at 20 stories? Who's got a ladder truck that's going to go 200 feet in the air, or do you end up fighting that with almost like the same kind of choppers you use to put fire retardant on wildfire areas? So it's, as technology continues to evolve and continues to improve, I think we'll see again some different approaches to not only fire protection, but also what types of occupancy would those buildings be?
Mhm.
Would they be habitation, or would they be office? And would they have different fire protection internally? In other words, sprinkler systems with even greater capabilities than the typical office design.
Mhm.
John, thank you so much for your help today. I wanted to give you a chance to plug, sorry, frog in my throat, River Tree Consulting. Besides your excellent class today, can you tell us more about what you do with River Tree Consulting?
Yeah, River Tree started back in 2021, and I started it principally with the idea of doing face-to-face instruction. And COVID kind of gave me a little bit of a cause to pause there and say, okay, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I do a lot of face-to-face instruction, a lot of stand up and teach in class sort of thing. But I do more than a few webinar style video instruction. I've worked with a lot of CPCU chapters doing their continuing education needs. Interestingly, I'll be going to Wisconsin in December, and trying to dodge the snow. That'll be interesting. I did that 3 years ago and flew into Minneapolis and drove 3 hours at night in the snow to get where I was going. This time I'm going to fly into Green Bay and hopefully only drive an hour and a half in daylight. So fingers crossed from that standpoint. We do any number of different types of curriculum. For example, when I go to Wisconsin, I'll be presenting 3 different classes, one called Fundamentals of Underwriting, the second one called Fundamentals of Reinsurance, and then the third one's one of the ones I had the most fun with. And, the underwriter in me rises up when I see a submission from a broker that's why you saw so much about data, with minimal information. And so that class is entitled From the Bottom of the Barrel to the Top of the Stack, Submissions That Get Action. In other words, don't bring some weak, poorly put together submission into an underwriter and expect them to take action on it. The more you put into that submission, the more data that's there, the more likely you are, Mr. Broker, to get a quote. So I'll be presenting all 3 of those. Those are 3 of our newest courses that we just rolled out this year. They're filed in multiple states. And so the process that River Tree uses, I write all the content. Then I go to the state. And first off, if I'm not already approved as a provider, I get approved as a provider. And if I need to be approved as an instructor, I get approved as an instructor. Then I file the class content, tell them how many hours I want. I send them the details of here's the minute by minute outline, this many minutes on this topic, this many minutes on that topic. I send them some biographical information on me. I tell them how we're going to administer the class, that here's the sign in, sign out. If it's an in-person class, here's the approach we'll take on poll questions if it's an online class. And then they come back and either ask me questions or give me the approval, and then deliver the class, and off we go.
Fantastic. And what's the website, John?
It's rivertreeconsulting.net.
Fantastic. Patrick, thanks for joining us for the after show today. Always a pleasure to have you along. John, thank you so much for your class today. Fantastic knowledge. And Patrick is right. Something that our curriculum lacked a little bit, but you definitely helped flesh out with some fantastic class today. So thanks for the information. Thanks for your help. Thanks to both of you. And on behalf of our instructor, John Brunette, and our director, Patrick Wraight, this is your host, George, saying thanks everyone for coming to the after show. We'll see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.